Welcome into the roundtable. There's nothing more therapeutic than listening to a studio attempting to emulate the sounds that are coming out of that last video. I'm Bill Priestley here along with Thomas Watson, Tony Mulvey. We're going to play a game of good idea and bad idea over the course of this roundabout, going through some of the stories we've had in the past week, the decisions that formulate our future and whether or not we're headed on a good path or whether we may need to change course. Gentlemen, the first one, the FMCSA has extended the hours of service waiver, and that is, of course, the fact that if you are working hours of service, that is wavered, that has been waived if you are doing something in relation to the COVID-19 cause, whether it's bringing food, supplies, medical supplies, that kind of thing. Good idea, bad idea. I'll let you flip a coin and see which one of you wants to go first.
I'll let Thomas go first.
All right.
Let's go. I'm going to say good idea. Anytime you have an emergency,
it's going to be FMCSA. Hours of service. In my experience, when that happens, it's time to go. And so go we shall, having the supply chain extend and also be a little bit more efficient in getting those supplies, especially now that there may be other variants out there. Always a great idea.
I think it's a great idea too. I mean, I think we are coming up on that time frame where, okay, maybe COVID-19 pandemic things are slowing down, but I mean, we've had this waiver in place since, what, 2020? Do we need to keep it in place, or do we need to rethink hours of service in general for some of these goods? I mean, is it just in an emergency, or just, hey, if you're hauling gasoline or food, do you need that waiver for all things? I mean, obviously apparel and things like that, not covered. Do you probably still need the hours of service there, but could you get away with having the waiver over a longer period of time? Do you even need the waiver? So I think that's what's going to be interesting.
That was a relatively easy one. Let's do something more difficult. How about we jump on to the Georgia governor extending the gas tax moratorium. Many people who buy, of course, just consumer gasoline think this perhaps would be a good idea. With that, you also have John Kingston, who came on the roundtable last week and said, if you have a gas tax moratorium, what that effectively does is just increase demand on gas, and then therefore that rises the price of gasoline in the first place. So good idea. Bad idea. Another 30 days of the gas tax moratorium for Georgia.
I think this one's difficult because, I mean, you haven't seen the adjustment necessarily in prices when you take this away. And I think that's where I think it's a bad idea. But, I mean, because ultimately it just puts more money into those at the station's pockets that own it. I mean, they're benefiting from high prices, high demand, things like that. So I think that's some of the issue I have with it. But I mean, if you were able to take the gas tax out of the overall price and drop the price by whatever that is, ultimately that's more money in the consumer's pockets.
I believe
which
it's 27 cents in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. I happen to live there, so.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking 27 cents on 20 gallons of gas, right? Or so what is that? $5? So I mean, if you fill up every week or every 2 weeks, it does add up, but it's not that significant of an amount, but it's still money that could go into the consumer's pockets.
Thomas?
I'm going to say Machiavellian bad idea in terms of like, so it's delightful. What do we use the gas tax for? Do I want better roads or $5 off? So like, you know, honestly, 30 days, okay, I can tolerate that. I still think overall it's probably just a bad idea because now you're getting my hopes up because it's eventually going to return and I'm going to be just as angry. And so, you know, when we make these decisions, as policymakers do that, you have to ask yourself as a policymaker, is this a short-term solution, a long-term solution, or am I still playing political football and this is the equivalent of running it up the middle? I think right now it is probably like 1st and 10, we ran it up there and we're going to get 2 yards. And so this is the equivalent of that. I would like it if they tried something a little more substantial. I'm sure that governments can do things like that, just like how California talked about fuel rebates and other ways to incentivize it. So let's open up the playbook. Maybe let's toss it downfield and give me a check in the mail for like $200.
All righty then. FMC wants more power. The Federal Maritime Commission talking about the fact that they had trouble with demurrage and detention fees, once with Hapag-Lloyd, trying to get over $800,000 from them there as well. So this is a situation where you have that kind of oversight and that kind of regulation. However, of course, coming out earlier this week, that the FMC noted that there really isn't that much collusion going on at the top levels. Good idea, bad idea to give more power to the FMC?
I'm I'm going to go contrarian. I'm going to say good idea. I'm normally not in favor of more government regulation, but when we looked at the creation of container companies, they were heavily subsidized by state-owned enterprises. Why is it that China can have, is it Costco, the different Costco, not the store, but the shipping container? You know, this is an issue where national security comes into play. If you're forced to rely on a cartel of ocean carriers, of which 5 or 6 control like 80% of it, there's a fundamental problem here that if we're not making ourselves in a point where we can have our own ships. And I think that some people will say, well, Thomas, I don't need this extra regulation, my government, and throw Twitter hashtags at me. But at the end of the day, I feel like a pragmatic solution here is that we have 2 options. We can either deal with the fact that these folks can charge these outrageous prices, or we can do something about it because other countries are, and so do we want to run this race with one hand tied behind our back, or would we like to actually try and be competitive for our consumer-driven economy?
Okay.
I think he makes great points. I think it is a good idea. I'm typically, like you said, against government intervention or things like that. But in this case, you've got 90% of the market held by 9 carriers. And they basically are like, nope, you can't go here. And it's like, they're setting these, you look at the spot rates on the ocean lines from China to the North America. They're 5 times what they were, up 200% in some cases still. So I think if you have some oversight to maybe increase competition as well, or help competition, make those rates not so, hey, we're all going to charge this rate, that antitrust, things like that come into play. And I think that's where some of this step in may be needed and would be a good thing.
Is the only reason, quick follow-up for both of you, is the only reason this is a good idea is because there is so little competition at the top?
Yes, from my side, yeah.
I would say there's a magical thing run by the but our policymakers, early people figured out that we need a nationalized way to deliver packages. Why is it that we don't have a nationalized solution to deliver goods, which is by far the lifeblood of our consumer-driven economy? We have this containerization. We had a merchant marine in World War II. Why aren't we doing things to make sure that when this happens again and the supply chain happens and I can't get critical components, there has to be something done. Obviously, it wouldn't be run perfectly, but doing something and having some of these container ships in motion provides some level of hedging to say, well, my USPS on the sea is at least able to charge X. I feel like you could do better.
All right, moving on to another subject which you now have a lot of experience with. We talked, of course, with Craig Fuller this morning about investing in freight tech during a recession. Is this a good idea or a bad idea in terms of being able to do this? Warren Buffett is famous for, of course, buying when it's cheap as opposed to buying when it's expensive, and that seems to be some of the philosophy behind Turvo's acquisition by Lineage Logistics. What do you think of the idea of investing in freight tech during a recession?
I think it's a good idea. And I say that if you're investing in the right things that are beneficial for your company. I mean, you're going to have those accessories that are nice to have. There's a difference in a nice to have or want to have and need to have, right? I mean, you invest in the things that need to have, that are going to make your business more profitable, even in downturns, or even just break even. Right? I mean, if you can, especially in transportation companies, we talk about it all the time, you see these differences from 95 ORs on the truckload side to 105 ORs when things are bad. If you can invest in these freight tech companies and have that return on investment eventually, but also be able to run a business, kind of like what Lineage is doing with Turvo, right? They're going to let it kind of operate independently, but also they're just implementing that into their business, which they had already started to do. I mean, what was it? 200 of their 400 facilities had Turvo in it. I think that's where it's a great idea. If it's just that want to have, don't really need it, that's where it's bad.
I think I'm going to start another thread called Watson's Guide to M&A and in terms of venture capital investment. So
I can't wait to see your blog.
Let's say somebody finally trusts me with $2 million to invest in VC firms, but what you do is now is the best time because the whole market is weird. Valuations, if you're trying to get funding in rounds, we threw money. Look at SoftBank. Look at these guys. Look at how WeWork had millions and millions, billions of dollars thrown at it. People were just throwing money at it with no regards. So now that the market's panicked, it's perfect time to buy. So think about it. You invest in these VCs, most of the time they fail. 50% of your portfolio is going to fail. Know that first. Secondly, you hope 5% of them make more than enough money to cover and make more than the ones who didn't. This is literally when I started in a startup, that's what I was told. We're the equivalent of a lotto ticket to a large VC fund. And so think about it. You're buying opportunity. You're hedging your risk. So now is the perfect time because the people who make it in this recession, in this economy, are going to be the ones statistically likely to make it. And you can also buy more shares of their company to profit, like Craig talked about earlier. We're planting seeds for that 7-year time span. Now's the time to start sowing.
And finally, I think one that we'll all personally agree on as well, Amazon doubling the size of their relief station in Atlanta. Of course, that's to help with hurricane season, which is predicted to be somewhat average, 6 to 10 named hurricanes that may become active in the Atlantic or in the Gulf area. Good idea, bad idea, and curse you if you say bad idea.
Great idea. This is an area where I think private companies can do things better than the government. I think this is one of those things where government insights would be, FEMA's great, but having a private company that can do this as well is a great thing.
And it's based in Atlanta, of course, which means it's inland far enough away from where hurricanes can hit, but can still get to both the Atlantic coast and the Gulf Coast. Sir?
Phenomenal idea. Whenever a hurricane comes, FEMA, it's like when you win the prize, you go inside the money drawer and you try to grab as much dollars as possible. Amazon doing this means that they're going to step up production. They're next to a lot of the FEMA locations, either in Louisiana, parts of Georgia, and parts of Alabama. They're close to the staging areas. They have extra warehouse space because look at their earnings and stuff. They have the ability to do it. Let's rake in the cash. Amazon wants in on those FEMA trailers. They're going to have lower volumes. Let the trailer sit. Charge Uncle Sam for tons of money. Make some profit and save lives at the same time. It's all about incentive, folks.
He's got an agenda, I'm pretty sure. That's going to do it for this edition of a Roundtable. We will take a short break, come back, and wrap up the rest of our show. Stay tuned.